Welcome to the TryPod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. It's Winnie here off a scorching second sweep in a row, back-to-back sweeps. So we have won 7 best bets on the trot, guys. And that's not just picking 7 winners. Again, these are two-way markets. These are each around $1.90. If you're flipping a coin trying to win 7 in a row, it's a 1 in 128 chance of doing it by random. On top of that, the sharpshooters did fire true last week as well, 2 from 2. And I'm a little bit slow off the mark, 3 or 4 minutes late because I've got a full chamber as well. I've got 4 videos from sharpshooters to include tonight as well. But well done last week to Undertaker. He had either 1 to 12, very close game, Eels Storm. I'm going to talk about round 22 shortly. And you can see it on the screen. And Benny had the Dolphins, same as me, which we just snuck home. Of course, I'm going to cover that one too. So we'll revisit all of the best bet winners and all the key talking points from last round in a rapid reaction. I've got some pod trivia for you guys. We've won 7 in a row, and that's an active winning streak as we roll into round 23. And how many best bets I've got this round? I think I've got another 4. Who can comment the longest ever winning streak in pod history? So this is the 11th season. Does anybody remember what our longest ever best bet winning streak is? Or maybe you can throw a guess. What do you reckon it was? But that'll be for one of the true OGs if they can remember that. So comment that. Actually, everybody, let's see your comments fire through. Guys, just give us, anything, a thumbs up, a sweep emoji, fire, comment your thoughts on the upcoming round or the last round. Like this video, please. I'm going to put the call out since we're going so well, because it really does make a difference to the viewership and just to the audience. I mean, I'm looking at YouTube. If you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe if you haven't yet. We're 3.9 something thousand. So it'd be nice to crack 4,000 subscribers. You can subscribe on Spotify. Even just liking, commenting on the video itself gets us more viewers. And that's, everything I've got. I've got nothing else other than the audience for this show. And if you have been tuning in, you've tuned into 5 straight winning weeks. So there were 5 Tuesdays in July, so we won every week of July. Hopefully we can carry that over into August. And I don't know, the only comments I haven't seen is those guys who were saying they were going to bet the opposite of my best bets. But as I've said for many years, you never see those guys sticking around too long. And speaking of betting around the best bets, I wonder if there's going to be a few more people trying to back the best bets this week, if people are going to be ready to fire right when I release them. Last week, I shared 3 best bets, and a couple of them did move pretty quickly. And I think that's because we're in form and everyone is confident. And let me reply. Someone says I got lucky. I was going to talk about luck too, because, 6 weeks ago, I went 0-3, and all 3 games were bloody close, and we lost them all. And I was just soul searching. And you look at the last 2 weeks, we've won 7. But you go back and look at those 7. 5 of them are clear winners. 2 are really tight. The Roosters first half against Storm, we won by a try. Obviously the Dolphins game, very close. We won by half a point and on the siren, right? But that's 2 out of 5. But to me, that's just close games breaking our way. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. I still don't think we've won more than half the tight ones. So I will apologize to absolutely nobody. Now, the answer to the longest winning streak, Zane has it there, 17. We did once win. Some other guesses are there everywhere above and below. And look, obviously 17 in a row is insane. We did it in 2018 or 2019, but I will say back then, if you did follow us, you'll remember we would share 3 to 4 best bets per game if we liked a game. So you're going to have those sort of higher variance with your results, because if you get a game right, you can easily go 3-0 or 4-0 in one game. So reality, we probably won about 5 games in a row, maybe 5 or 6 games in a row to get 17 best bets in a row. Obviously, it was an insane run. So look, I'm very proud to hit 7 in a row, but I just want to keep it going. And the truth is, I'm not doing really anything differently in the last month than I was earlier this year. This is my process, and the results fall as they may. But I told you guys, I pledged to you at the start of the year that I was coming back this season off a losing year because I still believed I could do this. And I just am warning you as I roll into the best bets now that, don't go crazy back in these because you think I'm hot or I can't lose, right? they have every chance of losing. And I mentioned before, 6 weeks ago, we lost them all and they were all tight, right? Recently, the tight ones have swung our way. So sometimes that's what it comes down to. But I'd like to think I'm doing a good job at the moment. But just general advice, back the best bets you agree with. I said I have 4. I was sharing the first 5 minutes with 5 and change now. So let's get into it. Broncos plus 6.5 at $1.90 on better. So that's the opening game of the round. Down in Melbourne, I actually think Brisbane have the firepower to mix it with Melbourne, have a chance to win, are sniffing top 4, as good as the Storm are, and hard to beat at Amy. I just don't think there's a great deal between those sides as Haas comes back in for the Broncos. On Friday night, I'm going to lay 6.5 with the Raiders at $1.91, and it's $1.90 everywhere against Manly. And that's simply because the Raiders are at home. They are superior to Manly. The big difference is the forward pack. And Canberra's off a loss. You can say, oh, so is Manly. But Manly could be on a slide. They've lost a couple in a row and haven't been that competitive, especially second halves. Whereas the Raiders, I think, had a 9 or 10 game winning streak snapped. That means you'll get their full attention. I think that's a light line to lay. So I'm taking the Green Machine Friday night. On Saturday, I've got the Sharks in the derby there against the Dragons. Minus 5.5. It's $1.90 everywhere. And again, it's about the Sharks just being the superior side. And I don't think they'll take the Dragons lightly because they saw what happened to Canberra a week ago. And the fact that it's a derby means you get full focus. And I don't know if the Dragons can replicate last week's effort. Cronulla are very much under the radar, still a semi-contender for mine, and still have their eyes locked on top 4. Nobody's talking about it, but I'll get to actually how close Cronulla are to the right end of the top 8. And my last best bet is going to be, which game is this one? This is Warriors Bulldogs, which I think is Saturday night. Yes, Saturday night. I'm taking New Zealand's team total under 16.5, and that's $1.80 on Ladbrokes, Ned's, Sportsbet, and 365. I just don't see enough points in the Warriors. And they've still got Wade Egan's out. The Dogs had a blip last weekend for sure, but still an elite defensive side. To score over 16.5, you're going to either need 3 converted tries or maybe 4 tries. I think the Dogs bounce back in that one. So as always, I give you just my too long didn't read on the best bets at the start of the show, and then we go in depth game by game. And I really welcome your thoughts as we go. But before we do jump into round 23, I do want to give you that rapid rewind because I'm not coming to you every Sunday, but we'll try and do it really fast. A lot closer than expected was Storm Eels, but I did want to say that in general. Maybe I missed a couple of good bets in round 22 because of all the bad weather. Bad weather really changes the sport, and it is no longer so much a game of skill. It's just as much a game of will. And it comes down to, in a lot of these wet weather games, just simply who wants it more. And I did also tell you I was avoiding some obvious tips, and I told you who Jim and Joe were going to back in round 22, and they would have been on Panthers for sure. They would have been on Raiders. They would have been on Bulldogs. Well, 2 of those teams lost outright, nearly all 3. We'll get to the Penrith game. You could throw Melbourne into that mix because Melbourne was a big favourite, 10-point favourite, who also didn't cover. Only one big favourite did cover last round. That was Brisbane, and we were all over that. We'll get to that game too. But Storm Eels, that's anyone's game. Just the weapon that you have in Xavier Coates that you can just kick to him for an end of set to get you a game-winning try is the only difference between those sides. So Parramatta fought really hard, as they did in Brisbane, replicated that against Melbourne and made Melbourne work extremely hard for that victory. Then Friday, this was just so sweet for me, as you can imagine. Warriors Dolphins. Dolphins win 2018 on the siren. So best bet was minus 1.5 on Tuesday, which it was on Dabble and Sportsbet, and 2.5 other places. Soon after the pod, it was 2.5 everywhere. By game day, it was 4.5. And I always say how, what you're trying to do, you're trying to beat the market. You want often to bet on lines that end up being a superior play when it closes at kickoff. But that doesn't always count for much. Sometimes the final result is not that close to the line, and it doesn't matter when you bet it during the week. But this absolutely mattered. If you didn't take it on Tuesday when I tipped it, you didn't have the winner there. So I'm glad that occasionally we can actually win by getting ahead of the market. Then on top of that, it's my team, and the Dolphins have a lead. Now, mixed emotions because we lose Herbie to a pretty serious hammy injury, leave a couple of tries out there, including that Herbie break, and there was another one with Marshall King, and I felt like the Dolphins left some points out there, and the Warriors quite undermanned. Great fight back by the Warriors, and probably should have gained control and won the game there. Dolphins with a man in the bin and down 2 points. I would have taken 2 because I'm playing with 12 on 13 and then try and win at extra time. And to have the balls to go for the win and to come up with the game-winning try on the final play was unreal. Like, how do you think I felt as a Finns fan? Incredibly proud. One of the greatest moments in our 3-year history, and it coincides with a best bet winning by half a point. I was through the roof for that one. I was absolutely stoked, and it's critical for top 8, for the top 8 battle, but also a killer blow for the Warriors who are trying to cling on to top 4. And then we had a win in the total opposite manner with the game after. Brisbane, we had them to win both halves. The line was 14.5 on Tuesday. That would have worked just fine too. Brisbane wins 60-14 against an absolutely decimated Rabbitohs, who, to be fair, lost 3 more players from Tuesday, maybe even 4 if you count Whiten officially being ruled out of the judiciary. So it was either 3 or 4 from the Tuesday lineup couldn't even play. Dead set 2/3 of the team are unavailable, or 2/3 of the cap, I should say, because some of the highest paid players have been sidelined, and the Rabbitohs really had no hope in that one. Brisbane bouncing back from the home loss to Para. Brisbane will think to themselves, if only they beat Para, I think they'd actually be top 4 right now and still very much in the hunt. And then on Saturday, we talked about the match of the round looked like being Roosters Seagulls, and I guess I can jump ahead to that. Roosters won 20-4. It was monsoon weather, and we did have a best bet. I told you the wrong team was favoured. We took +2.5 with the Roosters. It was 2.5 everywhere. By game day, it was +1.5. Roosters won pretty comfortably, 20-4. Scored one of the greatest tries you'll see this season, especially in the conditions. And I jumped ahead to that game because we all thought game of the round was Seagulls Roosters, somewhat of a finals eliminator game. Actually, the 2 lead-up games on Saturday were the way better games, and Roosters Seagulls was pretty dour. So I've covered that. Go back to Saturday Arvo. The Titans play the Panthers, and the Panthers win 30-26 with a try and golden point. That's after Penrith is leading 24-0 at halftime. And you wouldn't be, I couldn't blame you if you think Penrith's going to go on and win 40 or 50-0. And remember the play I told you, I had another winning bet that I shared, and I did tell you the exact bet. The exact bet was Panthers over 28.5. I said, I just don't see Penrith being stopped or prevented from getting 30 points. And I stayed away because it was maybe a bit square and everyone was going to be on Penrith. And I would have been so happy if Penrith didn't get to 30. And Penrith only gets to 30 because they get 4 points after the 80th minute in golden points. So, of course, my bet would have won. But I am sort of one of these people that also thinks like butterfly effect. Had I tipped it, I don't know, probably doesn't win. Somehow they probably win by 1 in golden point. But crazy game. The Titans from 24-0 down, storm all the way back. I'll be honest with you, I'm watching the game on repeat. Like I was an hour or 2 behind, and I'm catching up. No, I'm watching the game, and it gets to 24-0. And I never go on social media if I'm behind the final score. So if I'm unable to watch it live, obviously I just watch it as if it's live. And I nearly just started scrolling on my phone, trying to do some things on social media second half. And I thought, no, I don't want to see what the final score is. Like, I'll just stick with this game. And it got more and more interesting. If people are asking me the controversial moments, I mean, like I've told you guys, if you commit foul play to save a try, why is it not a penalty try? There's a high shot on Sammy and he's going to score and he goes into touch and it's a flush hit across the face. Like, that's a penalty try for me. The trainer running it across Campbell's sort of approach for his conversion was garbage. Like, as a trainer, you have to have some awareness. Why is no one else in the field? Why is nothing happening? Obviously, because there's about to be a conversion. I think it was gamesmanship, and it was pretty disgusting. And I knew that if Campbell didn't kick that goal, it was a 2-point game, and you had Nathan Cleary, you had the Iceman on the other side. Like, everyone should have seen that coming, but you can't really defend it. The Panthers got a half line break, got inside the 20, and Kenny puts a 25-meter pass on the money, and Cleary does the rest. And that just gets you to extra time. Anybody could still win, but the Panthers it's the class prevailing in the end. But a heartbreaker for the Titans. They should have had that. It looked like the Panthers were out of legs in that second half. The Titans had a chance to actually take the 2 late in that game, with like 3 minutes left. And the argument is, well, you'd only go up 4 and give the other team the kickoff, which they could regather, and then a try beats you. You'd rather just burn the minute with a full set, stay down that end of the field. But I don't know, if you kick the 2, now a field goal can't tie the game, and you just back yourself to keep a try out. I would have probably taken the 2 there. But as I said, I would have taken the 2 with the Finns the night before and been wrong. But the Panthers did find it. The thing is, you can push a team down the other end, but to get in field goal range, as we know, teams have only got to get 45 meters away, and that is field goal range when you've got a gun like Cleary. So massive win for Penrith. Like they went to the studio, and Reynolds is sitting there, and he looked shattered, because that could be costly for Brisbane, and Warriors fans would have been sick as well. That Penrith just keeps winning. That's 8 in a row. Ridiculous. I know some Blues fans will also be saying, we need to find a way to set Cleary to Penrith mode when he plays Origin too, because he took over that game. And that's what a lot of people have been looking for obviously in the Origin arena. And then Dragons Raiders was a great game too, just in terms of the effort and intensity. Pouring rain, gusting wind, and actually the Dragons had the wind advantage and had the better of the running in the first half, but I think it was only 10-all at halftime. So then you kind of assumed the Raiders would run over the top second half with the benefit of the win, but there was only 1 second half try. Give the credit to the Dragons. And this is what I talk about, the conditions being a great equalizer. This was a definition of just a hard-fought win. Just the Dragons playing at home, just desperate. And just every team can't be sky high every week. The Dragons, on paper, had no right to sort of hang with that Raiders side, but in good conditions, the Raiders could have blown that same Dragons team away. But in the sloppy, soddy conditions, just the more desperation got the Dragons over the top, and a well-deserved win. And it's one of those wins where the Dragons go, what could have been if we'd won a couple of other games? We've beaten, Raiders? We've beaten Storm. No, that might end up being the grand final for all we know. But the Dragons haven't been able to beat some lower sides and haven't won games where they've scored equal or more tries, and that's what's been their undoing. Already covered Roosters Seagulls, and that was a best bet winner for us. And that was the sweep. We didn't have a best bet on Sunday, but another big surprise, Tigers outplayed the Dogs. That should have been a best bet for mine, because knowing the conditions and knowing that was basically the Tigers grand final, facing up against Galvin. Galvin, in leaving mid-season and being the story of the year, or one of, because it's been a pretty controversial year, he's essentially said the Bulldogs have a better coach, have better players, and a better future, and I want to go there. And the truth is, he's not wrong, but that is, a slap to the face, and the Tigers squad would have felt disrespected by that. They pretended it wasn't about Galvin, but it gave the Tigers an edge, and just simply, similar to the Dragons game, just simply a higher intensity, higher want, was the Dogs undoing there, and the Tigers well-deserved. Also, you also do notice that trend of Dogs games in pouring rain. So you got the Broncos game blown off the park, similar against the Dolphins. Now this one, am I missing any? And it's not my observation. They talked about it, Matty John, straight afterwards. Fletch was saying, is it that smaller, more mobile Bulldogs pack that in the heavy ground and in wet conditions can't get that punch, can't get that go forward, because the Dogs don't have as much power. That's what you sacrifice when you got faster forwards. Matty talks about the Dogs' style as well, a lot more short passes close to the line. Well, in slippery conditions, that's harder to execute. I think those are both nice observations as well, and something the Dogs are going to have to address if they do play, in rain, in an important game. And they're all important in the home stretch, because the Dogs want to be top 2 as much as anyone. And I'll talk a little bit about the ladder as we do go game by game. But again, you can't be sky high every week. Dogs have got, bigger fish to fry ultimately this year, and the Tigers just had their moment. Tigers have quietly won 3 from 5, but I still don't feel like the Tigers have been impressive up to this one. They sort of ambushed the Roosters, won a Titans game that could have gone either way, but this one was truly impressive. And Adam Dewey slotting in 7, take your hat off to him. And then Sharks Cowboys was who wants it more? And the Cowboys didn't want it at all. The Cowboys didn't even want to be there. The Sharkies, with their powerful forward pack, dominated it from start to finish. But again, I think most sides would have beat the Cows. But it's probably another game you don't spend long talking about, and nobody is noticing the Sharks surging up the ladder. But I am, and I warned you about this weeks ago, and I have backed the Sharks for a best bet. So that's my takes for round 22. Sorry if I missed any big talking points. And the comments are flying in. It's almost like overwhelming trying to incorporate too many of them or respond to them. But I am putting up as many on the screen as I can. And now let's address round 23. So let's start with Thursday night game where you've heard I've got a best bet on. Melbourne, Brisbane at Amy Park, 6.5 point line. Best bet is plus 6.5 with the Broncos on better, $1.90. The Storm squeaked past Para, as I mentioned. Liero returns from a rest. Brisbane do regain Payne Haas, though Willison is sidelined. He broke his arm in that smashing of Souths. I don't have the numbers. Help me out if you know it, right? The Storm have owned Brisbane for years. I know in 2023, Brisbane was so good and Brisbane smashed the Storm in week 1 of the finals. And that was a big game, you know. But has Brisbane beaten Melbourne in any other fixtures in the last 5 or 6 years? Maybe there's one that escapes my memory, and maybe it even goes back longer than 5 or 6 years, maybe even 10, 15 years. It's been Brisbane wins have been few and far between. So I understand that angle. They're both teams that I actually look at as, you know, very strong sides, believe they can make a grand final. Both had a setback home loss recently. For Melbourne, it was to Manly by 2. For Brisbane, it was to Para by 2. But most importantly, these sides just want to establish their best brand of footy for 2 reasons. You want your highest level to flow into the finals at this time of year. There's no more sort of mucking around with combinations. You just want that consistency so that you're on your A game into the finals. And the other part is, of course, because if you can start to play your best now, it's going to decide the seeding. And Melbourne wants to be 1 or 2nd on the ladder minimum. And Brisbane's still in reach of the top 4, as I said before. I know the Storm are hard to beat at home, but I think the Brisbane, as I've got their lineup on the screen, I think Brisbane's got the makeup to mix it with Melbourne here. So, you know, one thing I almost have always said about the Storm for the last, well, for many, many years, because you had some immortals or legendary players, the Storm spine, and then they've revamped it with a bunch of new superstars, right? But I actually could argue Brisbane has the better spine with Walsh, Mam, Reynolds, and Hunt, while Melbourne's still missing Jerome Hughes. I am concerned that Payne Haas has been in hospital, but at least that actually forced Madge to let Haas rest. And I do think back to Origin 1 where Haas was best on ground and didn't train all week. And speaking of training, that's all Brisbane were doing last week against Souths. It was a training run, so no excuse not to empty the clip in this one, which is why I like plus 6.5, as does Ryan in the chat. So I think that is a rip snorter of a game to start round 23. I'm taking that converted try start. Let's roll it down to Friday. Knights, Panthers at McDonald Jones. Penrith are a 12.5 point favourite. Newcastle are off a bye. Before that, were blown out by the Raiders. Getting back Brady Best. Jake Arthur is in the halves alongside Cogger for this one. Penrith did that Houdini job on the Gold Coast. They did lose co-captain Isaiah Yeo, I didn't mention, in the wash-up for that one. So Papali'i slides to lock, but Sorensen is back to re-strengthen the second row. Here's the thing. Newcastle's got nothing to play for. So it's a hard one to judge. Like Adam O'Brien says after the Canberra game, you know, my team hasn't given up. We're still fighting. I'm proud. It's like that game was tied at halftime, but you lost the second half 26-0. So if you're proud after you just lost the second half 26-0, the bar's not very high for effort. So I'd be worried from that point of view. Penrith's won 8 in a row. It had to work overtime to get it last week, of course, but still 8 in a row from last to knocking on the door of top 4. It's a mismatch on paper. Like, you've got Gagai still there at fullback. Look, he's all heart, but not a class fullback. Talangi's increasing with confidence every week, while the Knights have got another new halves combination. Look in the second row. McEwen has to mark Liam Martin. I'm happy to pass this game because I don't want to need the Knights. Penrith could easily replicate the first half against the Titans from last week. I'm just not going to play Penrith here because it is over a 12-point line. The Panthers are away from home. The opponent is off a bye. And I can see Penrith just being happy to be in control in this game, not do anything too flashy, complete at a high level, and emerge with a gritty win if necessary. So I don't think there's high motivation to sort of blow the Knights out. So I'll leave it at that. Nightcap Friday, Raiders hosting the Seagulls. You've heard my best bet is Raiders -6.5. It's at GIO. I'll give you the team list. And Canberra's off that loss at Winnie Stadium in the wet, but they do stick with the same 17. Manly had their parade rained on as well, and it wasn't really close. Hopewadi out, shifts Turbo to fullback. Burbo also received a head knock and is out. So at stake, the Raiders are still half a win ahead of the Storm, but that's all. Only half a win. In fact, the Storm plays before this game, so Raiders might be second when this kicks off. And we are 44-30. So if I had no more tips, which I actually do have for this round, but don't forget we've got that pending Raiders minor premiership bet. So if that was to go on and win, we could, we might be 45-30 right now, which would be dead on 60%. We just don't know it. But that bet's in jeopardy too after that Raiders loss. If you look at the live odds, I think the Raiders have gone from $1.28 to like $1.60-ish for minor prem. We got it at $1.83. So you definitely want to, I've explained this in past weeks, the Raiders definitely want to be top and at a minimum top 2. And with the Dogs still in the mix, of course, these Raiders games are still very important. So there's no question there. As for Manly, their loss has slipped them to 10th, but with 8th and 9th playing the following day and the Seagulls still to host the Finns, Manly's season remains well and truly alive. I'm not questioning that, but I did hear DCE say in the presser, our season's alive, mate, even if we lose next week. And I just thought it's funny to say, even if we lose next week. And I reckon it could be a bit of an admission that he's looking at a very tough trip to Canberra and he doesn't want the team to think it's do or die because they could be deflated if they lose this. So I wonder if that's sort of having a bet each way for DCE. Look, I'm not afraid of Turbo at fullback at this point, or people were saying, Turbo could have a big game against the Roosters. And I've bet against Manly my fair share at times this season. Turbo can hurt you. He can for sure, but it just doesn't seem to happen every week. And you're losing the talent of Lehigh Hopewadi as well. And speaking of talented fullbacks, you've got the Manly reject. Kyle Weeks is one of the form fullbacks of the comp. He couldn't get a start for Manly, and he'll always want to have a big game against his former club. And then speaking of former club, what's the opposite of former? Coming up, Fogarty will be playing for Manly next week, right? Fogarty versus DCE kicking duel will be interesting in this one. And the added layer that the former will replace the latter next year. A DCE pretty much done deal to the side they just played, the Roosters, right? And Fogarty, as great as he's doing at Canberra, they've got Ethan Sanders, there for the future. But I'm interested in that duel for sure. Manly needs to win that if Manly's any chance. But the reason I'm on for a best bet and not afraid to lay 6.5 is this Raiders forward pack. Set it at the top. I think I'd take every Raider over the Seagull in the forward pack, other than Locke, where I'm looking at Horsburgh versus Gerbo, and I still think that's close at this point in Jake Trbojević's career. And then you add in home field, you add in good team off a loss. Yeah, again, Manly's off a loss, but is Manly a good team? I'm not sure. And I don't know if this game's going to be highly competitive. I've seen Manly slip away in the second half against the Dogs and against the Roosters. It could happen again here. So my best bet is -6.5 at $1.90 everywhere. And in addition to that, 2 of our sharpshooters have plays on this game. I haven't listened to either, but let's listen to them together, starting with Ben Williamson.
G'day, punters. Benny from Benny's Best Bets here. As always, thanks to the lads for having me on. This week we're going to hit Sebastian Chris at $3.25 on bet 365. He is he has 100% strike rate against Manly, 3 from 3 at the left centre. He's currently on his longest try scoring drought in his career at 11 games. Indigenous round, good vibes for him. I'm backing him to break the drought, score at $3.25 against a makeshift Manly right edge. Best of luck if you follow, lads. Let's get it.
And Undertaker.
G'day guys, Matty here. My play of the week's going to be Canberra Raiders over 24.5 points at $1.80 on bet 365. Canberra averaging through 9 games just under 34 points a game at home. So how we get to this number against Manly is a bit beyond me. Manly will try hard. They're playing for their finals lives, but it's pretty much getting close to over. The starting back row for Manly is Michael Cheekham and Corey Waddell. They're totally mismatched against Canberra's pack. So they'll have a go, but I think they're going to get outclassed by a pretty long way. I don't really see Manly keeping Canberra under 25 points, so that's going to be my bet of the week. Good luck.
So our two sharpshooters, I've scrolled ahead to Dragons, Sharks, but talking about the Raiders game, our two sharpshooters have liked a Raiders try scorer in the centres, and Matty has picked the exact play that I was staring at as well. Raiders over 24.5 because most bookies are at 26.5. And I thought about Raiders overs, and then I just figured I'll play. I don't know if Manly's getting to 20 either, and I'll just lay the 6.5, right? Because I think Manly could give up. But both of our sharpshooters agree with the Raiders. And then I look in the comments, Benny and the Bets, which is Benny Howard, who messaged me and said he didn't quite have time to record a clip. He's got 3 best bets. I'll share them all. He likes Knights team total under 16.5 at $1.80. So that's on Friday. Then he likes the Raiders team total under at 26.5. Now, we could all win. The Raiders in 26-18, and my best bet wins, and Matty wins, and Benny wins. But Benny Howard, tell me why you like the Raiders under this week, because that's actually sort of contradicting myself and Undertaker. And when we get to it, Benny likes Warriors team total under 17.5. So he's got the same as me. He's got Warriors team total under. And in fact, he's got a 17.5 there. And I think I've got 16.5 on that game. So we're identical for Warriors team total under. I didn't have a play on Knights, but that would suggest Benny's got a lean to Manly. So if Benny's still live, he can elaborate on that. We will move to the derby at Jubilee, Sharks Dragons, where I'm playing, keeping it simple. Sharks minus 5.5. That's the line everywhere. $1.90 or $1.91 is the very best. And look, I do my hat off to the Dragons. Toughness personified to Canberra. It'll take a replica to produce that result over their rival here. And Flanagan has named the same 17. Rudolph replaces the suspended Colquhoun for the stealthy Sharks. You all wrote them off. Be honest, you did all write them off 6 weeks ago. And I told you Cronulla can still make the 4. And you know what? Go back to that game where I was really confident Cronulla at home would beat an understrength Warriors, and the Warriors shocked them. Well, if the Sharks had won that game, and they were like $1.40, had they won that game, they'd be top 4 right now. But as it stands, the Sharkies are just one game outside the 4. And everyone is looking at Brisbane, who've won 6 of 7, and Penrith, who've won 8 of 8. And nobody is looking at the Sharks, who are only just like a bit behind Penrith and maybe equal with Brisbane, but just slightly behind on differential. And the Sharks have the best draw of anyone. So I'm watching the Sharks closely for that run home. Now, when I say best draw, I'm talking about most games where you're a shorter favourite. And that's games like last week for Cronulla, home to the Cowboys. They were $1.50, right? This week, they're $1.50. Now, mathematically, that means you should win 2 out of 3. It doesn't guarantee anything. We've seen plenty of upsets. So, you know, you don't know who's going to be injured, who's going to be suspended, or if a random low-ladder team is going to play spoiler one week. I get all that. You can't just pencil in wins and losses on the ladder. But it gives Cronulla a really good opportunity to have a strong run home. They've just got to turn up and take care of business in a game like this. I have gone best bet Cronulla because I think that the Sharkies will. I don't think Fitzy's group will be complacent at all. Looking at what St. George were capable of last week, the weather should be drier than last week. In an afternoon game, I think that's advantage Sharks. They have the better halves. Their hooker, Brayley, is on the top of his game. And the Dragons are a team that make you earn it, but if the Sharkies truly are top 4 caliber, they win this by 6 or more. And I do think it's a bit to ask for a team like the Dragons, who can be a bit up and down, to to repeat that huge effort that they produced against Canberra last week. Moving to the middle game, the twilight game Saturday, it's a possible finals eliminator game. It will probably an eliminator if the Roosters lose. It's Dolphins, Roosters minus 1.5 at Suncorp. And yes, Winnie will be in the house. So thank you to the Dolphins. They're making me a guest of honor for this big occasion. Off one of my proudest moments as being a Finn fan in the last 3 years, that win in New Zealand Friday night. But I touched on it briefly. Like, losing Herbie was a high price to pay. This guy was going as well as any outside back in the competition, and defensively and obviously with the ball was just unreal for the Finns, and is a massive loss. And in addition to that, you lose Kaufusi suspended. Fini Fuiaki is back at least. As for the Roosters, they have the luxury of the same 17, which includes Radley, who returned from a shoulder injury in that wet win at Rookie. And if you get a little bit of deja vu, this fixture was the same as we saw at Magic Round, where I've got to admit the Tricolours prevailed. Roosters won 36-26. Teddy was on fire that night. I think Nwonga, Tuase and Toya grabbed doubles and blew my boys away. And this is a true 4-pointer. Again, it's worth 2 competition points, but it's 2 that your opponent doesn't get, and it's 8th versus 9th. To set the table for you, the Dolphins are essentially 2.5 points ahead of the Roosters, okay, because a massive points differential advantage there. So a win would put the Dolphins with a 3-game gap, essentially, between themselves and the Roosters. However, if the Roosters get up, only points differential would separate these sides going into the final 4 rounds. And I'm going to level with you all now. I am really nervous. I'm wearing my Finns kit, not my pod kit today, because I'm so proud of last week and they won us the best bet. And it's a huge game coming up, but I'm not telling you to bet on the Finns. The Roosters' back 5 is deadly, as we know. The Dolphins going without Farnworth, who I said has been unbelievable. Fiane and Nafahu are our 3-quarter line. Avarillo on the wing is a makeshift winger. Izako's on the other wing. He's injured. Like, he's playing, but he's playing with injury. As amazing as Katoa has been, Walker is a special player. Let me throw this question to you in the comments. Who do you want for the next 10 years? Because I know everyone is frothing Katoa. Like, keep your hands off him. I don't want anyone else coming near him. But if you were to ask me, like, at the start of this year, you could have any player for the next 10 years, I think I would have said Sam Walker. And I was expecting a great year by Izzy, but he's even exceeded my expectations. Now the answer might be Izzy, who I think is a couple of years younger than Walker. But Sam Walker's as special and as promising as anyone in the competition, as great of an asset. Footy fan says, I'm shocked you didn't take Roosters here. So let me get to that. I'm already terrified of the back line. I'm looking at the halves as pretty even because of Sam Walker. I'm looking at the forward pack, and I think the Roosters have got us there as well. So I know that the Roosters should be a favourite here on the road. This line should be at least 3.5, and it's only 1.5. And I want to just be really honest with you. I think the Roosters should be a best bet. You can still get $1.85 on Dabble. So I actually will stare down the barrel of the camera and say, I'm letting you guys down because I do have a bit of bias and emotion. And there is a part of me telling me that at home, the boisterous crowd, beautiful conditions, the Dolphins have played with outstanding spirit week in, week out. The team is truly connected. There's a spring in the step after being bold, playing for the win, and that's going to strengthen the bond, getting that result in New Zealand. And that's what I'm telling myself, but I don't know if I fully believe that. I mean, you've heard me. Most weeks I've leaned to the Finns or I've liked them and I've backed them plenty of times, and I'm rarely not confident at all in the Dolphins. And this week I'm really not confident. So take that information for what it's worth. I've presented it to you and said, like, that's what's holding me back, but maybe I am biased. I don't know. Are there other people in the chat who give the Dolphins a chance? It's set up now where I'm going to be there. I'm going to ride my Finns hard like I do every week, unless it's the best bet against them. If the Dolphins win, I'll be doubly stoked that they get an all-important win, a step towards a maiden finals berth, and dodge what would have been a losing tip. But if the Roosters roll, I'll be doubly sick, won't I? Because on 2 counts of my team losing and also of having not tipped it. So I think the Roosters are the sharp side in this one. And I thought long and hard about making the Roosters a best bet. I think if I had no dog in the fight, that's probably what it would be. But there you go. It's that's that little bit more challenge when your team is involved. And I didn't have that dilemma for many years. I was agnostic as a footy fan, and that was okay for me because my team was whoever I had a best bet on. But I've thrown my support behind the Finns last 3 years, and I try and just lay my cards out on the table and be really honest about how I see their games. So as Based Aussie says, Finns have too many injuries now. So absolutely the Roosters should be favourites in this game. But you can't write the Dolphins off either. In fact, let's give the last word to Nicole, who's probably not weighing in on a side, but he might have a try score tip for us.
Hey everyone, it's Nicole from Wiki. Look, I love Mark Nichols at $19 to score a try anytime this weekend on Bet365. Since 2022, he has scored a try every 10 games in the NRL. $19, obviously double that. It is going to be a very interesting and close game against the Roosters, but he's only scored 1 try this season in round 1, so I'm backing him to crash over this weekend. $19, I reckon that's about 2 times the price you'll see on most bookies. I reckon about 1.5 times what the fair price would be. Anyways, good luck, punt responsibly. As always, Google Wiki Linktree. Our odds comparison tool is free for everyone. We've got it working for AFL and NRLW, as well as obviously NRL try scores. Good luck, punt responsibly.
Well, I'd love to see that from a Finns perspective, the goat crashing over. Let's move to Saturday night. Bulldogs, Warriors. Bulldogs 8.5-point favourites. Best bet Warriors under 16.5, which is $1.80. Sportsbet 365 Ladbrokes Neds. These are 2 top 4 sides that need to dust themselves off coming into round 23. And the Dogs were just beaten to the punch, as I said, against the Tigers. Now, they've named the same 17, but there's talk that Galvin is dealing with a hand and ankle injuries, as well as maybe bruised pride, considering the side that he left toweled him up. Sexton is in the reserves if Galvin's no good to go. The Warriors suffered a different type of disappointment. They were beaten at the bell, as you know, marking back-to-back home defeats, which makes it all that more disappointment. And that's since the Halasima Hail Mary in Newcastle. The Warriors have lost at home, come back down to earth twice. Harris Tavita is in the 6th jersey returning, and Fisher Harris is in the extended squad. They could really use him for this one. New Zealand's desperate to stop this slide. On a positive note, Warriors fans, no one expects you to win this game, so often that's when you really turn it up. I was kicking myself for not taking the Tigers last week. I've spoke about the Dogs' issues in the rain, but it should be better conditions this Saturday. I want nothing to do with the Warriors, right? And that's why I have actually played the Warriors team total under. Without Wade Egan as well, like, where's the scoring strike? Yes, you've got Lecker the Wrecker there, and like Roger's still good for some flashes. Tuapicki's a handful, but the Dogs can key in with less points of attack there. And the Dogs are still an elite defense. I just thought against West, some of the tries were a product of the conditions, like kicks in behind that got spilled or opportunistic, intercept try there. This week, I think the Dogs will be really focused on their defensive principles, their line speed, and that's going to restrict the Waz. And I think it leads to a rebound win. So I was looking, I could have just gone -8.5 with the Bulldogs, which they are everywhere. But I'm sort of looking at New Zealand, who have underwhelmed for a few weeks, and I can see the Warriors ripping in. And I think the Warriors' only chance in this game is to make it ugly and make it tight. So I'd prefer to play the Warriors under 16.5. Boyd has been kicking well below average. So you feel like if the Warriors score 3 tries, and you tell me right now they score 3 tries, we're still a 50-50 chance of getting under 16.5. And if the Dogs really turn up with a purpose, I don't think it should come down to conversions. Let's move to Sunday, arguably the biggest game of the weekend. It is, drum roll, the Spoon Bowl. Titans, Rabbitohs. It's the Titans who are a 6.5-point favorite at home. off a tight loss. It should have been back-to-back wins for the Gold Coast, as we've covered. Khan Pereira's in for Sami, and I think I already mentioned as well, and I've said this for weeks, if you're allowed to take a player's head off when they're trying to score a try, you're allowed to tackle them in the air and tip them over, then if I'm a coach, I'm telling players you stop the try at all costs, because we can defend a penalty, but we don't want to give the opponent 4 or 6 points. So I don't know what, like, if you shoulder charge somebody and they're going to score in the corner, or you take their head off, right, then that should be a penalty try. It's not the way they rule it, but Sami doesn't even play this week now. That's how bad the contact was. Randall does return for the Titans. Souths have lost, I'm losing count. Is it 9 in a row for Souths? They are decimated by injury. The stat was that 2/3 of the Rabbitohs salary cap is sidelined. So that's what, like $6 million on the sideline. But Latrell is in the reserves for this one. So there's $1 million. Brandon Smith is back on the bench. Mamazilas returns from concussion protocol. And Bennett, the thing about Wayne is he's been wise enough not to apply pressure to his team. He's not flogging these boys. He's not making them feel bad. He's not embarrassing anybody or putting anyone on show when they're losing. Bennett understands the reality of the situation. It's the craziest run of injuries he's had in his whole career. And Bennett knew they were lambs to the slaughter last week. I mean, the Bunnies didn't even name an 18th man. I know they couldn't have, but you'd fly somebody up if it was a do or die game, right? This game, though, being the dreaded spoon bowl, I could actually see Wayne getting his boys sky high for this one. And Titans have shown us plenty. And as I've mentioned previously, it's almost frustrating when you see what the Titans can do over in New Zealand or against the reigning premiers, and that's without Tino. And you see AJ and Jaden Campbell. I would say both these guys who I've always been a fan of, they're in career best form, and it's exciting for the Titans. And Kinney will come back into this team next year. That's great, but as I said, no Captain Tino. 6.5 point favourites now. Everyone is talking about what a basket case Souths are. I mean, I've heard a lot of people dissecting round 22, right? And a common narrative I've heard is, Brisbane weren't even impressive. Have you seen that South side? Like, they've got nobody left. Like, that Brisbane should have won by more. It's like, hang on, Brisbane put on 60 points and it wasn't impressive at all. And if it was that obvious, why didn't you lay 14.5 or 15.5 or 17.5, Like, why wasn't plus 13 plus, a mortgage on it then? Everyone's acting like it was a foregone conclusion. Well, if it was that obvious that South had no chance, you should have been on them hard last week. Don't try and make that money up this week when maybe Souths have already had their all-time low. And maybe now with a couple of guys back, I mean, I'm not playing the Titans tonight. No way. If you back the Titans minus 6.5, not saying they can't cover it, but tomorrow you might find out Latrell's in, So what I'll leave you with, though Padonis does have a best bet coming, but what I'll leave you with is, for me, it's a high variance game. I'm not going to be surprised at all if the Rabbitohs win, and I'm not going to be surprised if the Titans, have a bit more form and class behind them and win by 10 or more either. But I'd love to see which way Padonis is going to play this one.
Hey guys, Padonis here. Hope you're all safe and well. Coming off a bye round in round 22 last week. Couldn't get a play out in time, but we're back ready to continue the momentum. Sitting on a 14-5 record so far on the live show. My best bet this week is going to go to the Sunday Spoon Bowl. We're going to take a dirty underdog there with South Sydney at plus 8.5. That's $1.85 on better. Put simply, I just feel that these two teams couldn't be rated differently by the marketplace. We saw the Gold Coast have hit a little bit of form over the last 2 weeks. It's coincided with some close results and a win there over in Auckland. The market's bumped them up a few points, but don't forget they're still without Fafita, still without Tino. And then you look at South Sydney, they do get back huge in Latrell Mitchell. I'm not sure the market's really incorporated his inclusion correctly. I know that they are depleted, down so many players, but these are the type of games that Bennett circles and he gets his guys up for it. And I have liked the application and commitment that South have shown despite losing by some big scores recently. They defended their own against the Sharks and held on in a gritty loss at 14-12. But last week, I think it was a little bit of a case of Brisbane opened the floodgates there. But I wouldn't rule out the Bunnies getting the outright win here. I just think the 8.5 is too many points. I had this closer to 4.5 or 5 personally. It's a lot to ask of the Gold Coast to now cover by big margin when they've been a considerable underdog in so many spots recently. So they could be a little bit flat after what happened last week with their hearts ripped out against the Panthers. So bunnies for me here. Good luck. Gamble responsibly.
I like the way Padonis breaks it down there. Now, he's speaking as if Latrell's definitely in. Well, he's actually not in the 17, but if he's borderline to play, you'd usually say, well, no reason to rush Latrell back. But the season's lost anyway. What's Latrell had recently? Like, was it foot or hamstring? I mean, if he re-injures it, he re-injures it. This is kind of South's biggest game this year because it's the most important game when it comes to avoiding the spoon. So if Latrell's marginal, he probably does play. So I think the line will shorten when he comes into the team officially. And Padonis is sort of saying, well, you can get 8.5 now. It's not going to go any higher, but it could definitely shorten. So I can see that. Now, I did also tip Souths for the wooden spoon in the season preview. So I'm kind of hoping that Titans can actually get this home win. They're $1.40, I don't know if that's clouding my judgment there, but I reckon if I had to play a side, I'd go the 8.5 the way Padonis sees it. And look, if the previous game was the Spoon Bowl, I'll call this one the Who Cares Cup. Eels, Cows, North Queensland plus 4.5. And look, Para went close against the Storm. Tuolungi's back on the bench. Sam Rani's in the centres for Russell. We've got, for the Cowboys returning, is Taumalolo, Clifford, Vailea, and Michele. They do lose Griffin Neem. And Nanai is back into the forwards after a tough time in the centres last week. I said in round 22, the weather was the great equaliser, but it didn't matter. It didn't help the Cowboys against the Sharks because they were disinterested, especially in that first half. And while the Cowboys mathematically were still alive a week ago, now it's not even a miracle's going to resurrect North Queensland. So I guess all you can say about the Cows is they're still talented playmakers. And I said the same thing last week, like still got Drinky, still got Dearden. These guys can make stuff happen. But Paris should be favourites because you've seen their application and the direction each week. And Ayongi's out, but I'd be excited as a Para fan. Like you thought you were going to get Galvin, you missed out. You maybe wanted to re-sign Brown. They're probably not at the number that Newcastle's paying him. You lose a young star half that you would have liked to see his combination grow with Moses. But next year, Para's going to have Ayongi at fullback, Papali at 6, and Moses at 7. Like, that's really exciting. However, not this week. Papali remains at fullback, and I won't dwell too long on this game pretending I can clearly see how it plays out because for me, it's another high variance. Like, Cowboys could win 13+, but Para could also win by 20, So no, none of our sharpshooters have a bet on the game. I'm seeing comments. Eels will win. Parramatta. Well, that's the same person commenting, actually. Cows play better with Clifford. Won't be a cakewalk. Eels, Cows, both to score 20. So that's probably the best angle of all, actually. If the weather's going to be clear, you play an overs, just like I did a couple of weeks ago with Dragons, Cowboys, because they'll throw a bit of caution to the wind. Although Para the last couple of weeks have had nothing to play for except pride and have actually defended admirably up in Brisbane against Melbourne, holding a lot of firepower to under 20 points in both those games. So I guess that counteracts it there, but still in an afternoon game, maybe overs is the play. So that's how I have seen it all this week, guys. And if I can, I'll even grab the best bets and chuck them on the screen. As I say, a big thank you to all of you. So once again, best bets. Once again, guys, if you can help me just with interacting with this show, I want to see if that can make a bit of a difference. That those metrics really matter. So if you want to subscribe on YouTube because you're not subscribed yet, especially if you watch it regularly on YouTube, because I watch stuff on YouTube, I don't really subscribe to anything. Like I get it, but I'd love to see that number tick up, get over 4K there. A lot of you guys probably don't realize too that this show broadcasts in a lot of places. This show right now is live on YouTube, Instagram, and 3 big Facebook pages. And in addition to that, it gets put on all the podcast players. So some people don't actually realize how big the audience is. Like you might see 1,000 or 2,000 views on YouTube or whatever. But there's a couple, 2,000 or 3,000 people watching on Instagram. There's 2,000 or 3,000 people watch on each of the Facebook pages. A couple of thousand people listen to this show. We get 10,000 people every week. And that's why I want to say thank you to you guys, because I put out the call for help. I asked people who needed a Dabble account, and it wasn't really people needing. It was just if you didn't have one and you wanted to support the show, and I was advising it's worth having, but also that it would help me. Like, I've got to say, I've asked for help a couple of times this year. It's really heartening for me that a lot of people have reached out, and people I've never seen their name once. They've never once commented. There's a lot of people out there who follow in silence, and they say, look, I've never, I've never jumped in the comments. I've never interacted, but I've followed for a long time, and I'll do anything to support the show. Like, that meant so much to me. I had people lining up to help. I had people who I said, I've got enough help now. Can I put you on standby? And they said, anything you need, I'll help you next time. So that, like, in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a couple hundred people following because I know the people I've met in person, or I know the regulars that comment, but there's actually like an awesome community that's way bigger. And every time I ask for help and I get new names, jumping in my DMs or emails or whatever, it means a lot to me. So I just want to thank you guys for that. And there'll be a day will come where I might need to ask for help again. And, please reach out, even if you never have before. And I can help you guys too as much as I can. Hopefully I can with the results. So yeah, if you can sort of hit that likes to this show, drop a comment afterwards. That's what I need as well to sort of keep powering the show forward. And that's the kind of metrics that any potential sponsor looks at too. And I feel like we deserve to maintain this audience and grow it, because you're never going to find another show out there that's obviously got like an 11-year track record like what you've got with the pod, and someone that I feel that you guys can really trust me, that what my intentions are, and that I'm putting in the work every week to try and deliver the best results. And that can't promise the results, but the results are what they are at the moment, 44 and 30. And as Benny comments, I did actually see Benny giving us a little bit more, and he disagrees with my Raiders bet, and that's fine as well. Like, and I love to have the conversation. Benny says, still think the Raiders are overrated. They've had a soft draw. Manly are giving up 20 points a game. The Raiders average 28, but that equates to 24.5 if you sort of average those out. And last 3 night games, Raiders have only scored 16, 16, 22. He thinks the blowout potential is more for the Raiders' day games where they've slaughtered teams. Manly's defense is underrated at night games. So, look, yeah, I respect that angle that the Raiders have actually played it a little closer in night games. I'm laying the points. I don't need the overs, but, to win by more than 6.5, I'm sort of expecting the Raiders will get at least 4 tries, maybe more. But, again, respect the way that Benny's breaking it down. Another member of our community with an outstanding NRL betting record that and I really appreciate that he contributes to our group. So let me know how you see it in the comments. As always, guys, have a great week, and I'll be back in 7 days to dissect how we went and do it all again. Thanks once again. Lego.